Hello everybody and welcome back. This is Peter Pronovost, and today we're going to discuss the senior leader's role in quality and safety efforts, and in particular in our on the cusp Stop BSI efforts. Now, this session is either for senior leaders or those whose job it is to get them better engaged in this project. And it's the same work for both of you. Now, the learning objectives are one, for us to understand very deeply the differences between technical and adaptive work. That's the model by Ron Heifetz that we're using in this program. To understand the roles of senior leaders in addressing both of these types of work, and then to really dig down and to share some tactical ideas that have been used successfully by senior leaders to support this particular quality improvement effort. Now, for the senior leaders out there, you may not be familiar with the goals of this project. So this project is a national or indeed international effort to eliminate central line associated bloodstream infections. We want to get your state's mean infection rate less than 1 per 1,000 catheter days and the median to 0. We want you to improve culture by 50%, and we want you to learn, not just recover, but learn from one defect. And our scorecard that we'll be using to do this really has 4 types of measures reflecting our goals. How often are we harming with bloodstream infections? How often are we using evidence-based interventions with the checklist? How often do we learn from our mistakes? And have we created a safe culture? Now, to do that work, we recognize that there's both technical components of the work and adaptive components, and let's try to disentangle them. Technical components are really parts of the work where it's much clearer. There's definitions that are clear, there's work that is clear. It's, if you can think of it, it's the science. In our case, it's the measurement and the evidence. But the real messy part of leadership is adaptive work. Indeed, Heifetz has this quote that says, really, leadership is activity to mobilize adaptive work. Because you see, though there's technical work in this project to measure these infection rates, and we have to do them well, the public deserves that, most of what we're doing is really going to be adaptive work. Now, adaptive work addresses problems that require some change in our values and attitudes and belief, and generally for which there's no known science. We have to come up with the ideas. And what we've seen in quality improvement work is you have to get it both right. If you attack these just as technical problems, they fizzle, and it's like the myth of Sisyphus pushing a rock up a hill. But if you also address them just as culture change or adaptive work programs, they're like a big kumbaya sessions and nothing gets done. There's no measurable results. And we have to make sure that we do both components of the work right. Adaptive work is really what's the sticky part. It's hard, it's messy, because without some change in our values, attitudes, and belief, this stuff doesn't take hold, it doesn't stick, which is exactly why we combined the culture change program, CUSP, with the empiric program to put evidence into practice. Now, adaptive work as leaders really requires leaders letting go. They share the responsibility with their staff. They point the direction. They create the charge that we're going to eliminate these infections. They say what hill we're going to climb. They are unwavering in the goal. They also create a vessel to discuss the goal, and they turn heat up towards achieving the goal, but they don't have to have the answers on how to solve it. Indeed, if you think about one of the most common leadership mistakes, and we're riddled with it in healthcare, is treating some adaptive problem as technical. Because the reality is, you didn't get to be a senior leader, or you didn't get your position, or I didn't get my position, not being very, very effective solving technical problems. Someone comes to you with an issue, you say, oh, here's what you do, go do it. And that works great when the problem is purely technical. But what we're dealing with in healthcare and change in healthcare is much more adaptive. And we need alternative strategies to begin to engage our staff. So this adaptive work of leaders has to be that you clarify what must change and unwaveringly commit to change it, but the methods of how we change really can come up from your staff. Now, what's the model that we've used to do this in our program? Well, we call it the 4E model, and it's a simple but profoundly powerful model that says 3 groups of stakeholders. The senior leaders, those are you, your team leaders, your ICU directors, and your staff have to go through 4 stages to really become engaged in this or really any quality improvement project. That is, we need them to be engaged. And this you have to do as leaders. Engaged means they could provide an answer to the question of how this work makes the world better. How this work makes the world a better place. Without a clear and explicit and meaningful answer to that question, you're dead in the water with this work. And senior leaders, cost cutting or saving money or improving operating margins doesn't engage clinicians. They want to know, how is the world better? How are lives being saved? How is Josie King less likely to die? We then need to educate them unambiguously, explicitly, clearly, what do our folks need to know about this work? Then we need to execute. What exactly am I going to do? And how can I do it with my resources and my culture? And we offered an awful lot of strategies for you to think about that. They include standardizing work, creating checklists, and learning, not just recovering when things go wrong. And then finally, evaluating at the end of the day, how do we know we've made a difference? What you can see embedded in this model is that engaging and executing are all adaptive work, and you have to have local leadership for that. Now, it's not that pure. There's both technical and adaptive pieces mixed in with this, but to a larger part, the education is technical. There is evidence for how to reduce bloodstream infections, and whether you like it or not, the evidence is the evidence. And likewise, there's a way to validly measure bloodstream infections, and it happens to be what the CDC espouses, and we're gonna put that forth to you. What your role is to make sure that you do the adaptive work exceedingly well, because we've provided through this program and the grant support the technical work. It doesn't make sense for every hospital to invent their own method of measuring bloodstream infections or to review the evidence in detail. We'll do that centrally. It's much more efficient, but we need your leadership towards this. And what might your leadership look like in this? Or frankly, any quality improvement program? Well, again, let's make sure that you focus and execute on both the technical and the adaptive goals. So is everyone explicitly clear on goals to get these infection rates eliminated, timelines and mission, and importantly, how this makes the world better? Is there a necessary structure and resources in place? Do you have people and a measurement system to collect the data? Do people know their roles? Do they have the authority and responsibility to create a central line card, to actually implement the interventions that are critical to the success of this project? Are there clear decision-making and problem-solving and conflict management processes in place? In healthcare, we often go awry because we're very ambiguous about our decision-making and our conflict management process. Is it the charge nurse? Is it the ICU director? Is it the department chair? Is it the COO? Is it the VPMA? Is it you as the CEO? Who's in charge and how are the decision making? Now, the structure that this takes will vary amongst organizations, but we need a clear, unambiguous process that everyone knows. It's much more important to have a known and explicit process than having one standardized process for this across organizations. Are there material resources in place? Do you have the right space and equipment, people and budgets to actually get this work done? And are there financial mechanisms in place? As you, I'm sure, are well aware, CMS is no longer paying for these infections that we're working on. And so your organization, like mine, is really keyed up to make sure that there's mechanisms are in place to track these infections and to document the financial impact of them. What might some explicit actions be for you as senior leaders in this project? Well, part of what we're going to do is this CUSP program is have a senior executive partner with the ICU team. So you need to make certain that there is an executive assigned to that ICU team, that that executive meets regularly. In this case, we recommend monthly with the ICU team and functions as a member of the team. What this does is it communicates loudly, clearly, unambiguously that senior leaders are invested in safety, they care about safety, and they want to work with the staff to make the resources available to do the political work to make this project successful. You as leaders can create clear, publicly announced, unambiguous goals and expectations for this project. You can provide opportunities for teams to meet with their senior leaders and allow them to present this project to your board or to your senior management meetings. It's incredibly motivating when you could take a frontline nurse or a doctor and invite them to talk to the board of trustees about what they're working on and their success. That is incredibly motivating and informative for you and your trustees. You can ensure that the team has the necessary resources and time, travel time, to work on these projects. You know, in part of our work, and you'll be getting reports on this, we have staff every month complete a tool that we call our team checkup tool. And on it, we ask them what's slowing their progress and to rate various items. And two of the, I'd say, unanimously selected, and certainly the most commonly selected barriers are senior leadership support for this, physician support, and then time or resources to do this work. Because there is no doubt the payoff from these projects are enormous. One of these infections are estimated to cost $26,000. Think about what you can save. Just multiply how many infections you had last year by that much money, and that's what the delta on the table is. And we know we can virtually eliminate that. But you need to make some wise strategic investments in people, in their time, to make that happen. The return is profound, the return on this investment. Indeed, across the whole state of Michigan, this is at a state level, the return on investment was about 400 to 1, 400-fold to 1. And the investment was only made for 2 years. At least it's paying off now 4 years still. So the investment is even continuing and getting larger. But you need to make some investments. Also, you need as a leader to support transparency. You know, if I could think of one of the biggest things that we need to do in healthcare is what the Security and Exchange Commission did in 1934 when Franklin Delano Roosevelt created it. And that is to ensure accurate, transparent information. In that case, about financial markets. In this case, about safety. So make sure that your rates of bloodstream infections are public, are circulated widely amongst your organization, and that they're used for improvement. I'll tell you, at Johns Hopkins, every Friday afternoon, we submit what's called a weekly report of harm. And on that report, one of the items are how many people did we infect with bloodstream infections this week. Now, we don't report rates every week because it's too noisy, but we do report the numerator. That is, who did we harm and what are we going to do about it? And I could guarantee you that report gets action. It comes out around 4 or 5 on Friday afternoon, and if there's infections, the CEO, the hospital president wants to know from the leaders in those areas, what are we doing about it? And that report will often have to be, if not that afternoon, Monday morning. That's the kind of action that transparency brings. You also need transparency about the barriers. There's no doubt these projects return investment for you. They put joy in your staff's life and they save lives and money. But there will be barriers to this. Not every intervention is going to work, and you need to make sure you have a mechanism, a listening post to surface those barriers, to identify them, and to mitigate them. And lastly, perhaps most importantly, is you need the courage to tell your own Josie story. You see, every one of our organizations has their own Josie story. What I mean by Josie story is the very public story about the little adorable girl, Josie King, who died at my hospital from preventable mistake. The story of the girl's mother who made a video and talks about it. The girl's mother who I went on national television with, on Good Morning America, to discuss how my organization was responsible for her death. That, I could assure you, takes humbleness, takes courage, takes clarity of purpose. But in doing so, it is enormously powerful, invigorating, and healing. And your organization would be greatly aided when you have the courage not just to show Josie's video, but to publicly discuss a patient who was harmed at your organization. Discuss it with your board, discuss it with staff, and make a commitment that this won't happen again. In our organization, indeed, frankly, in this whole project, Josie is the clarion call. We galvanize around her unfortunate death, and importantly, the answer to her mother's question, is she less likely to die? How do you know care is actually safer? She deserves an answer. There's no doubt this project could give her an answer that's a resounding yes, but it will take your leadership and your support. Next, what you can do as a senior leader is expect resistance and address it in an effective way. Again, you don't need to have the answers to these adaptive problems. What you do need to do is not quit on the goal of eliminating these infections. You can't give about the mountain that we're going to climb, but you can invite all in to solve it with you, to listen to the dissenters, to turn the heat up when you need to, but to make real progress. And lastly, make sure that you have an explicit plan to celebrate wins and provide encouragement, support, and the resources if you have success, which I have no doubt you will. Your teams are going to work really hard on this project. It will take their effort. And you should celebrate and reward their hard work. That could take the form of a pizza party. It could be writing about your staff in a newsletter. It could be inviting them to present to your staff meetings. But you need a way to celebrate it. You know, one concrete resource that I haven't mentioned yet, and it's really critical, is you can make sure that your hospital has chlorhexidine, a type of soap, in your central line kits. Let me share with you, when we started in Michigan, chlorhexidine, a soap that costs about the same as betadine, an alternative, cuts infection rates by half. That is, if you change from chlorhexidine from betadine, you can reduce infection rates by half from that technology. But many organizations didn't have it. Indeed, 80% of Michigan hospitals lacked chlorhexidine. And as part of the project, the CEO of the Hospital Association, Spencer Johnson, and myself sent an email to all, or a memo to all the hospital CEOs and said, hey, there's this soap that cuts infections by half. It's called chlorhexidine. Most of you don't have it. We want it in your hospitals, in your central line kits, the kits that are used to place these catheters, within 4 weeks. Remarkably, with no formal authority, but only their own commitment to do the right thing, when we asked them 4 weeks later, the whole state had chlorhexidine except for two ICU hospital in the Upper Peninsula that said, we put about one central line in a year. It's not worth it, but we got some chlorhexidine containers and we have it available if they use it. That's the kind of support your staff need to see from you in this project. That's the kind of leadership that we need if we're going to prevent these needless deaths, dollars, and suffering from these infections. And that's the kind of support we need if you're going to look Sorrel King in the eye and tell her that, yes, Josie is less likely to die at your hospital, at your state, in the United States, and here's how we know it. This is Peter Pronovost working with you to improve patient safety. Have a great day.